My name's Chad Poole. I am the Retail Operations Manager for Siser North America. I've been in the industry coming up now 8 years. Well, there's a lot actually involved with it. A lot of communication between our retail partners, setting up items, making sure that our e-commerce platform is set up and ready to go with developers. A lot of communication between our production facility to make sure we have the product to get out on time. And honestly, a lot of different things around the office. We don't just focus on our day jobs here. It's kind of a hodgepodge. So whether that be helping out with marketing or advertising distribution, we are really a jack of all trades. So whether that's product testing or helping out with customers from a sales perspective that, hey, I've got someone with a piece of large format equipment that needs some help, profiling, helping out with marketing, we kind of do it all. So it's yes, we do have our day jobs and our sole focuses and priorities, obviously, but we're always willing to help and help in other areas of our company. I would say my specialty is probably large format printers or printers in general, printers or vinyl cutters. In our industry, for the apparel industry, a large format printer is essentially a solvent-based printer. They can get up to generally 64 inches in length, and you're printing on heat transfer vinyl, or you can print on sign vinyl or banners or canvas, you name whatever you can feed through the printer. So in my opinion, the large format printer, particularly solvent-based, is probably one of the most diverse pieces of equipment you could have in our industry, in your shop. Reason being is you're not limited on colors. So instead of having you don't have to burn 8 different screens for an 8-color job. It's just printing. You're laying ink down on heat transfer. You can provide decals. You can provide canvas art. You can provide banners. So it's almost an all-in-one machine without having to have the footprint of 4 different technologies. Okay. I used to be in charge of equipment sales in a previous company, and what we would do is we would qualify our customers. So if you're coming to a trade show, or if you call us and you say, hey, I want to get a print cut system, and you haven't had any knowledge industry or you haven't been in this world for some time, there'd be a lot of times where we'd say no. And the reason being is it's a big investment, really. I mean, it's anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 generally. So we want to make sure that you're able to print and go right from out of the box. We don't want to see somebody struggle with something like that. In a lot of those cases, I would say, hey, let's start out with a vinyl cutter and a heat press. And you can always outsource those jobs until you get comfortable with graphic software, designing things, just cutting in general, because it is a print and cut system. And understanding the different types of apparel and different types of garments out there that you can apply to. Once you graduate to that level, I think that you're in a much better position to go down a print cut route, and it would be more beneficial for your business and easier for you as an end user. And my favorite moment at Seizure so far was the minute that Dave and I together walked into a Michaels store and saw our product on the shelf. And it was so gratifying knowing that we put in all this hard work and all of this communication and the back and forth and the deadlines and the pressure to get product out, and to see it actually packaged in the store is just so gratifying. And I'm just super grateful for the opportunity to work here and work with the great people that we work with, but to explore this world of retail operations, because it is something that is not necessarily new to me, but it's different than everything else I've done in the past. So I enjoy the opportunity, and I'm looking to thrive in it. I would say I think it was our 3rd episode in. I've got 2. I think it was our 3rd episode in. The first one was funny because I was not used to cameras on me and headphones, and Patrick's he used to do a podcast himself, so he's privy to all of that. But I'll say once we got past those first 2 episodes, I remember doing the 3rd episode and really finding myself catching my groove and focusing on those or whatever my tendencies were. And I finally felt like, okay, I've got something going here. My confidence is building. And I remember walking out of that podcast, out of that shoot with Patrick, and we both were like, that was good. We felt really good about it. And, it was a good feeling. So that's one of my most memorable moments. Another one would be when we took a road trip out to see Caitlin Burton over at Happy Crafters. That was fun just because of the times we're in. We were able to get out of the office a little bit. We were able to do a test run with bringing our equipment everywhere. And I think we've got some B-roll footage of us in the car and stuff like that. So it was fun to go in somebody else's house, so to speak, and work there because as much as I love the podcast room, if you're doing Zooms constantly or if you don't have new guests coming in, it's easy to become redundant. So going to somewhere else and seeing what they have on location and having that interaction was new to us and adventurous, and it was fun. So definitely research, of course, what brand that you like. So there's several manufacturers out there. There's Epson, Mamaki, Roland. I'm partial to Roland. Muto. There's several different solvent-based print cut systems out there. So certainly do your research on brand and also what are you looking to accomplish with it, right? So a lot of people will say, well, I just want to get that entry-level machine. Well, and the problem I always had with that is the machines range anywhere from 20 inches generally up to 64 inches. So while the 30-inch or 20-inch may seem enticing at the time because that price point is just a little bit lower, I would say pump the brakes, wait a couple more months, and go bigger. So go 54-inch or go 64-inch. And the reason I say that is you can always go smaller. So a lot of heat transfer in some of these products, decal in particular, are generally 20 inches or 30-inch rolls, but you can never go bigger if you're stuck in that size restriction. So when you're offered banner jobs or you're offered big signage jobs or wall graphic or something like that, it's a lot more difficult when you're limited on size restriction as opposed to getting a 54-inch or 64-inch, because ultimately, like I said, you can always put whatever's in that can fit within those pinch rollers. But you can now purchase 54-inch media or 64-inch media and get the bigger rolls and be able to utilize more of the media and more bang for your buck. So not necessarily my favorite job specifically, but I would say one of the most unique applications that I've seen ran through printers have been perforated window decal. So a lot of times you'll walk by a liquor store or something like that, and you'll see the Pepsi logos outside, or driving down the road, you'll see a truck with a cab and it's got like a bald eagle and American flag and stuff like that. And it's fantastic because you can actually print on that media. The bottom side's an adhesive. So where you see the back logo and you're viewing it, the reason it's perforated is so they can see out the back of it. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Now, when you're talking about a storefront and you have the Pepsi logo, right? If you don't laminate that, the problem that I've seen in customer shops is when it rains, you can't see outside the window. So when you're doing it on the truck or on the road, any kind of vehicle, it's actually by law, it's mandated to laminate it, because otherwise, if you're driving and it's raining, you can't see out the back of the window. So I've always found that really interesting. I've never personally done a perforated window job, but I've seen a lot of backlit signs. Those are pretty cool. Canvas prints are always a crowd pleaser. You can't go wrong with that. So there's a ton you can do with it. But as far as uniqueness, I don't have a specific job, but I would say perforated window has always been the one that's intrigued me the most. I think the biggest mistake is understanding color and color management and what your printer is actually going to print versus the expectations from a customer standpoint. So a lot of times I used to hear the old adage of, well, it looks purple on my screen, but your transfer you're supplying me with is blue. And the reason that happens is because you're actually viewing the artwork on an RGB device. So it's red, green, blue. But it's a light emitting device. So it takes those three colors and light and creates what you're seeing on screen. As to where solvent printers are CMYK based. And what that does is CMYK, that color space, absorbs light. So there's nothing to emit that. So it's really important to communicate to your customer beforehand is, hey, for one, get me the file as native format as I can. And also supply them with the expectation of, if this prints, it may come out a slightly different shade depending on the color space that it was taken in. If we're talking raster or vector, there's a whole rabbit hole of color management we could go down, but I would say that's probably the most important and misunderstood parts of printing. So there's two major editing softwares. There's Adobe Illustrator and Corel Draw. I'm a little bit partial to Corel Draw. I think it's a little bit easier from a end user perspective. With that said, there's multiple variations of artwork that can be printed. So you're not limited to what you can print, but I think the limitation is putting a cut line on something. So if you're doing a print and cut job. So I think the biggest misconception out there is, I take a photo of Patrick and I sitting in a room and I'm just going to press a button and it's going to put a cut line around it and it's going to send it to the printer, which is not the case. A photo or anything that's made up of pixels is called a raster image. Then you have what's called vector art, which is line art, meaning you can maneuver it, scale it any way you want, and it's not going to distort the image. So you can put a cut line on a raster image. However, there's more steps involved in that. And you also have to make sure it's a high quality image. So if you bring in something off your cell phone and you can already see it's pixelated at 2 inches big and you want it to be an 8x8 on your shirt, it's going to distort even further. So with that said, I think an auto trace tool would be a good tip. That's in Corel and Adobe, the trace tools. They'll do the best job that they can as far as tracing a raster image into a vector. And then once it's vector, you can distort it any way you want. Another good tool in Corel specifically is something called the B-spline tool or Bezier tool. And that allows you to draw a cut line around anything you want. So instead of having to vectorize something, you can actually draw your own cut line on it, and you can really be precise and limit the amount of nodes you put down and stuff like that. So there's a couple of tips and tricks, but ultimately my advice would be just to play with it, right? And get comfortable with it and start to understand the functions, the shortcuts, what your limitations are, because the printer is going to print. It's always going to print. It depends on the quality and what you can put a cut line around.